On this episode of The Squadron, we have Scott Medlin, an active law enforcement officer, a motivational speaker, a prolific author of law enforcement books, and he's here to talk about a wide variety of topics, including an addiction we haven't covered before. It's an addiction to porn. Stay with us.
You are a warrior.
321 status.
What kind of vehicle is it?
You are the very best your nation has to offer.
911.
Multiple shots fired.
They're asking you to lead.
5. We need a Bearcat.
It's up to us.
So 133. I need somebody that's got a visual on where the shooter is.
You must be sound in mind, body, and spirit.
42, where's the officer down? I have a rescue helicopter that wants to land and help.
This is the podcast that will make you the one.
Copy running eastbound.
The one that will bring everyone back.
Trouble, we have shot fired. Give me backup now.
Because no one else is coming.
We're going to have an officer shot. 100 block of East Street.
Suspect is down.
This is The Squad Room.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Squadron Podcast, the place for cops who want to create more resilience, improve their work-life balance, and attack each day with positivity and a passion for the work we do. On this show, we cover the tactics and strategies you can use every day to create a life worth living both in and out of uniform. My name is Garrett Tesla. I'm a full-time sergeant for a sheriff's office in Southern California, and I am on a mission to build a world where first responders wake up inspired, feel confident at work, and go home safe knowing they've spent their time in a worthy cause. I repeat that why statement at the beginning of every episode, at least since I formulated it and kind of came up with it as my reason for being here. And it's true. It is how I try to look at every day. An opportunity to build a world that doesn't exist yet, where we wake up inspired. Wouldn't it be great to come to work and wake up feeling inspired about the work we do? There is nothing in the current environment, the current climate out there right now, that really should prevent us from feeling inspired by the fact that we do a kind of work that can't be done by everybody, that we are called towards this, and to feel confident at work. And to feel confident at work, we need to feel supported, of course, by our agency and our bosses, but we also need to know how to take care of ourselves, know how to take care of us, our perishable skills, but also our mindset, our resilience, and those things. And of course, the goal for all of us is to go home safe, but not to just go home safe, but to go home safe knowing that we've spent our time in a worthy cause, to quote Teddy Roosevelt. And yes, that's an intentional quote from him, because I just love that idea of a worthy cause. It's one thing to go through your day and do some work, but it's an entirely different thing to know that you spent your day doing something that was worthy of the time, that you're not just trading time for money, that you're doing something beyond that. All right, enough of that. Before we get to our guest, though, I want to remind you of a few things. First, if you're on social media, make sure you're following us at The Squad Room and that you liked our Facebook page. You can also join our Facebook group. Just search The Squad Room group to join. But most importantly, head over to thesquadroom.net and get signed up for our mailing list. People on that list get exclusive access to free downloads, and I send out content that's exclusive to that list. So don't miss out on something that can help you in your life. Join our list at thesquadroom.net. All right, my guest today is Scott Medlin. Scott began his law enforcement career in 2007 after 2 tours in Iraq. Scott is the author of 3 books. The newest one, Truths Beyond the Police Academy, a field manual. Scott speaks nationally about leadership, teamwork, and how to build resilience as a first responder. And he speaks from his own experience, and you'll hear his story here in just a moment. In this episode, we talk about the moment he realized he had an addiction to pornography, how he lateralled into a toxic culture that sunk him into a pretty deep depression, and then out of all that, why he gave up his dream of being a canine officer to focus on his family. Scott's message and Scott's example here, when we talk about work-life balance, all of us can think of cops who there was no such thing, right? No such thing as work-life balance. It was all work. And of course, we can think of people too that are only the quote-unquote life. And so I come around more and more to this idea that there is really maybe no such thing as a work-life balance. It's a work-life integration. And it's certainly an ebb and flow. And there's times where work pulls more from us, or life might pull from more from us. And we have to be okay with that. Scott's decisions about why he left some positions and why he left full-time law enforcement to emphasize the family part is really a courageous thing to me, because I don't know if I would have the same inclination, and I know a lot of us wouldn't. We would maybe dig our heels in and double down on the work part and just let the life part fall apart on us. And he didn't do that because he was very aware of the issues that he and his wife were going through, and what the job was doing to him. And he's very open in this great conversation. So please enjoy this episode with Scott Medlin. This episode is sponsored by OfficerPrivacy.com. In the age of the internet, social media, and smartphones, there's so much amazing information out there that's at our fingertips. I can research any topic or person I want to and learn all about them, their family, and way more information than I really should be able to. The problem is people can do that same research on us too. Whether we like it or not, our information is on the internet, out there for people to find. Just accepting this and doing nothing isn't an option. We as cops have a giant target on our back these days. I don't know if you noticed, but it's kind of rough out there. Sometimes that's literally a target, and it's life or death. And other times it's just dealing with potential harassment. Either way, we don't want to expose our families to those risks. Being careful about what you post on social media, that doesn't go far enough. It's easy for a bad guy with an iPhone and free Wi-Fi to hunt you down. That's why OfficerPrivacy.com exists. My friend Pete James is the founder, and he spent 25 years in law enforcement here in California, using much of his career to hunt down criminals and evidence on computers and on the internet. Pete knows how easy it is to find you, and since he's one of the good guys, he can help. OfficerPrivacy.com offers 2 packages to choose from to help you clean up your side of the internet. Their premium service, the one I use, allows you to sit back and let the professionals do the work, where they will work to scrub the internet's top 30 people search sites that can expose your home address. Then they will work to maintain your privacy by monitoring those same sites. If you show up again, they'll remove you again. And here's the thing that other privacy companies don't tell you. You will show up again. It's impossible to keep your stuff off the internet just that one time. It takes constant diligence. That's why their team is so helpful. They do it for you. Now, they also offer an at-home solution for those of you that have the time and technical ability to do it yourself. Using their proprietary software, you can remove yourself and your family members from these same top 30 people search sites on the internet, and then use their software to conduct audits as often as you'd like to make sure you haven't gotten added back yet. To learn more about how you can keep safe, check them out at officerprivacy.com/the squad room. When you sign up through that link, you'll get a free USB data blocker, and your first month of monitoring is free. That's officerprivacy.com/the squad room. Scott Medlin, welcome to the squad room, Scott.
Oh, Garrett, appreciate you having me on. This is really an honor.
Well, likewise. Right before we hit record, I was just talking. I've seen your stuff out there in the ether, in the internet for, a long time, and always been on that. Okay, I got to talk to that guy. I got to get him on. I got to, dig into his stuff. And, life is just life, busy stuff's going on. And so, there's all these great people that I have in my head, right? And you were one of them. And we actually ended up getting connected through a mutual friend who put us in touch. And he's like, you two need to meet. And was like, cool, let's do it. So this is an extension of that. So I'm excited to have you here. Your website is leomotivation.com, and that's pretty self-explanatory to any Leo out there. That's a law enforcement officer for our very few civilians who listen to the show. We already know that, I think. But tell us about your story, kind of how you got into policing, and, we'll start there. But then I really want to get into what has inspired you to go out into the world to share the positive messages about policing and its purpose that you do now. So let's start with what was it that draw? I'm always curious. That's that sense of what brought you into policing in the first place.
It all started, I know some people hear when they go to a domestic and they hear, well, it all started when they just cringe. Look, I'm going to give you a quick answer. It all started when I was a kid. I was waiting in my mom's car in the garage for us to take her, for her to take us somewhere. And there was a guy going door to door that did not live in the neighborhood. I lived in a very small neighborhood where everyone knew each other. And he was standing really close to the doors and then also looking in windows when he was going from house to house. I got scared because he was getting close to our house. And I said, Mom, what's that guy doing? She ends up calling the police. And I just remember that feeling of wanting them to come to protect me from whoever this guy was. And that just kind of planted the seed. I wanted to also be the one to protect. But at the same time, my mom let us watch that TV show Cops, and I just really enjoyed that. I was like, why would you want a desk job when there's people out there doing what they do? And that's what kind of got the itch. But I got into it in 2007, and from 2007 to 2020, I was active. I'm part-time with policing now. But I made a lot of mistakes along the way, not taking care of myself. And also all these things that I thought, I'll never get sick. I'll never have a bad relationship because of the job. I'll never this, I'll never that. Well, that stuff happened to me and nobody ever thinks it does. And that's what led me into inspiring officers to really focus on themselves so they can do that much better for others out there that call 911.
It's an interesting, I wonder how many careers in policing are out there right now because of Cops, right? Because of that show.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, we weren't allowed to watch that show, and I had to sneak episodes of it, right? And I remember my parents would come in the room, and I have to click over to something, real fast.
Yeah, my mom, she had her moments where it was like, turn it off. This is too violent. Yeah. But I'd say we were middle school age, and we could handle it a little bit. But I was just like, man, look at what they're doing. Why would anyone work in an office? I'm not knocking office work by any means, but this is, just me.
Yeah. No, I mean, I went into office work for, close to 6-7 years before I realized, I can't do this. I gotta be out. I gotta go do out there and be out that. So we started in policing roughly the same time, within a couple of years of each other. And it's interesting what you said about how you don't think it could happen to you, and so much has changed in policing from when we started, right?
Absolutely.
I don't know about what it was like in your part of the country, but here in California in 2005, 2006, before the financial crash, it was an extremely competitive position to get. Everybody wanted in on policing. I think when I tested, they were hiring 5 people and over 500 people showed up for the physical test. So I don't know if that was the same experience you had where you came from.
It was a little bit, not that competitive, but I do believe in the power of networking. In the department I wanted to work for, I had interned my senior year in high school with that department. So they knew me, and I made a point to do as many ride-alongs as I could, even on rainy days, on weekends when the cops were like, what are you doing? Why are you here? I had the long-term goal in mind. So it was all about networking. And I know that helped me to get in the door when it did come to time to apply. But that's incredible. 5 positions, yet 500 people show up. That's amazing.
It was like that for a long time. There was about a 1% hire rate. Which now we're scrambling. We're hurting for applicants to come through the door, and we're still getting quality people, but it's that struggle to convince them to come over into a life of service right now. When people are looking at the news and looking at social media and they're like, why on earth would I jump into that? But I think it goes back to things like what happened to you when you were a kid, or my experience with police when I was a kid, and understanding that there's something bigger out there that you can be a part of than just sitting in an office, like you said, and
right.
that call to it. I think there's so many people out there in the world right now who, are on the younger end or maybe they're even established into a career, but they haven't listened to that call. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's just part of being human is a call to service in some way. I think that we are all, it's ingrained in us to be of service to other people. We are tribal. We are meaning-seeking creatures. We want to be of service to other people. And those who listen to that call end up in, policing, fire, military, EMS, those kinds of professions. It's but we see people all the time. Like, how many times when you're on patrol did you run into some I don't know, optometrist or something like that who's just fascinated by your job and just gives you that man, I wish I could do that, or man, I wish I'd done that, or I thought of
Right. Or
doing
the
that, but I
story of,
didn't think I could.
well, yeah, or the story of, I almost signed up. I'm
Yeah,
like, well, why
you get
didn't
down a
you?
lot too. Yeah,
It's-
and often, yeah, and it's funny. Like I don't know, it's just an interesting thing, that pull to service. It took me a long time to listen to it and tap into it. You got it right away. But going back to your story, that I was talking to somebody about this just yesterday. This assumption when you're young, when you're in your early to mid 20s, even late 20s, and you're thinking, I'm too smart to let that happen to me,
right.
or I'm good. I have a good sense of. We were talking in the sense of resilience, and you can be very resilient at 25, but you can't assume that you're going to have that same resilience at 45. You know,
Correct.
it doesn't get stronger on its own.
No.
And it in quite the opposite. That slow drip of corrosive humanity
Yeah.
onto your soul really starts to work away at you. And my story is very similar to yours, where, I mean, at the start of the podcast, when this podcast started 6 years ago, whatever, it was because I was like, oh, wow, I'd let a lot of things really affect me that I didn't think, were going to happen to me. Out of shape, bad diet, really bad sleep, et cetera, et cetera. What are the things that you were struggling with that, do you remember that first moment where you're like, I gotta change something? And what was it?
I've always been a pretty nice guy. Yes, I mean, I'm not perfect by any means, but I've overall been a pretty nice, uplifting, cheerful guy. And there was a moment about 2 years into the career where I yelled at someone on a call. I was like, this is not me. Why did I just do that? I didn't feel good about it at all. I mean, yes, it gave me control of the situation, but I didn't like doing that. And then I'd say maybe a year or two after that, I started to get the mentality that all people were bad. I was unfortunately running into a rut of dealing with nothing but habitual violent felons in a busy district in the city where I worked, and I literally started to doubt society, period, when it came to good people being in it. And my supervisor had to say, "Do you need some days off? Why don't you just go take some days off?" Those are kind of the first incidents where it's like, wow, this is really getting to me. And unfortunately, and this is always embarrassing to say, but if it means another officer can know that they're not the only one going through it. I battled an addiction. I battled a porn addiction, and I hate talking about it. But if it means helping out another officer to seek help so that you can continue to be better, then that's good. So those three things were like, wait a minute, what is going on here? And that's what made a light bulb click in my head. I need to start working on this.
So the sounds like the first thing that was a trigger for you, or first thing that kind of came up in your head, was that anger or lack of control, losing control.
Yep.
And that's such a common one. One of the first red flags for officers in any situation like this, where you realize it's getting to you, or you're developing maladaptive coping strategies. It's anger, and
Yep.
it's so interesting how universal that is. Whether it's organizational stress or critical incident stress or stress at home or things even seemingly disconnected, the first human response to those stressors is anger.
Yep.
And we often misattribute that anger to something else. We blame it on something else, or we push it onto something, because to be angry, you need to have something to be angry about, right? And we, like for you, putting it on this idea that the world is full of all awful people. And that's such an understandable statement. I think any cop listening to this is going to nod their head and be like, yep,
Yeah.
get it. Because they either think it, and they think that, well, he's right, they all are angry or they're horrible people. Because guess what? We deal with all the horrible people in the world every day, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Absolutely. But
it's a cliche at this point, but we don't ever get called to the high school valedictorian's house because they need to be congratulated, and that's our job, is to go over there and congratulate them and shake their hand. Or when someone comes back from a mission to Africa, saving lives,
right.
Cleaning up water or whatever, we don't meet them at the airport and drive them home, because that's not our job. Our job is to go deal with, frankly, the drudges of society, so everyone else doesn't have to.
Yeah.
But then if that's the kind of, like, You're familiar with the phrase. You're the average of the 5 people you're closest to, right?
Oh, very much so. Yes.
So I want, if an officer is thinking about this and they're thinking, well, of course, people are awful. Why does it affect me? Like, think about the people you're surrounded by, right?
Yep.
Your partners may be great, but you're surrounded by some pretty bad people. You're going to start having some pretty bad thoughts if you don't develop some real good strategies early, right?
And
And
act on them.
that's why, and then oh gosh, it's one thing to know it, right, and one thing to act
Yeah.
on it.
Yep.
It's different things. So, I know you said you hate talking about it, but this is actually maybe the first time I've ever heard it brought up in any conversation I've had with an officer was about a porn addiction.
Mhm.
And I think we understand drug addiction. We understand like alcoholism. Those are, both common in our professions. But there are these other addictions, these other maladaptive strategies that often don't get the same attention or respect, I guess, as a drug or alcohol addiction, because it's just assumed to be more natural, I guess, or more accepting. I don't know what the word is. Like, someone who overeats as an adaptive strategy,
Right.
that I think gets a lot more eye rolls than someone who struggles with alcohol, for example. So, you know, what was the what is I mean, there must be a moment or a level between and I guess there's a whole other conversation about if there is such a thing as a healthy amount of porn or an adequate amount versus too much. But there must have been a moment where you realized this is starting to take control, because that self-awareness to even be aware of it had to be part of that conversation. What was it for you that was solving?
It wasn't solving anything. It was my brain saying that it needed something to feel good to keep that high going from the job. But it's totally against my faith. I mean, it's a total sin, and I can't stand that industry even exists. But yet somehow me, the little goody two shoes in college, and only gambled $1.30 in Vegas when I went for the first time. I become addicted. So I really got down on myself for it. But when I went and got help for it, the doctor said, your brain is telling you that it needs that rush to fulfill something. We need to find out how we can get away from that and get you towards something that's actually productive and will help you strengthen your faith and not pull you away.
And so what was that for you? What solved that, or what turned that corner?
At the time, I had made the mistake of leaving the police department where I had wanted to work for so many years. I actually left because I was around some negative officers, and they influenced me because I was pretty formidable as a rookie, and they had a negative influence on me. I thought that police department was absolutely awful because of their negative outlook. So I went to another department, worked there for about 8 months. I was miserable. I hated being there. I felt like a kid that got off at the wrong school bus stop. I was just like, what am I doing here? And when I went back home, and when I got back to where I needed to be, and I made it a point to uh, work on becoming married, because my wife and I, she was still my girlfriend at the time, and I'm sorry, fiance at the time. I had to start working on being a good husband. I can't get in that stuff when I'm married. So really made an effort, but also through the power of neuro-linguistic programming, the doctor was able to help me reprogram my mind where there wasn't that urge anymore to go to that stuff. And like I said, I mean, it's embarrassing to talk about it, but I know there's other officers battling it. I've had some confide in me before, and they didn't even know I went through it. Uh, but when I was
It's
doing
surprisingly.
research,
Go ahead.
well, I
Sorry.
was going to say when I was doing research for my book, Mental Health Fight of the Heroes in Blue, I found out that 20 to 30% of police officers who work nationwide across on patrol are going to battle a substance abuse problem. But that's not limited, in my opinion, to just alcohol. It is, like you said, Garrett, eating bad, or the porn industry, stuff like that. Anything that is a quick fix but a long-term problem. And that has to be addressed.
Yeah. It, so there must have been because I don't think anybody goes through that or is in the middle of that, realizing that this is a bad coping strategy, right? They're just, oh, I'm just
Hmm.
blowing off steam. I'm just enjoying myself, or I deserve this, or all the things we tell ourselves. So there must have been a moment of self-awareness, or maybe it was forced upon you by your fiance at the time to be like, look, this is not okay. Or was it internal? Was it something you just realized one day, you know what? I got to be done.
It was internal. I realized I had an
Wow.
addiction. Yeah, I was like, wow, this is an addiction. This needs to be fixed right now. I am less than a year away from getting married. This is awful. And I realized I had to have it. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm on the street, on patrol, talking to people about battling an addiction, and I've got one of my own. This is not good. And that's when I was like, I can't do this on my own. I have to reach out to someone. And I reached out for the same doctor that helped me cope with PTSD whenever I got back from my 2 deployments in Iraq. And he worked wonders and really helped me to reprogram my mind so that the temptation wasn't there to resort to that.
So you just touched on something I think that's very important. You were in the Marine Corps before you moved into policing, and so
Mhm.
you were in service there. Uh, was the Marine Corps part of your path, like intentional part of your path to policing, or was this a hard left because you wanted to go? You didn't expect to do this. How did you end up in the Marine Corps?
I knew I needed some discipline. And plus, the Marine recruiter came into my 11th grade history class where the teacher was a Vietnam veteran and a Navy corpsman who worked side by side with the Marines when he was in Vietnam.
Mhm.
And the Marine recruiter walked in, I saw those dress blues, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at that uniform. But it was also the way he presented himself, the experiences he talked about. Plus, I remember in elementary school thinking about service to country. So I believed
Mhm.
in it. And then the Marines just got my attention. And like I said, I knew I needed that extra kick in the butt for discipline.
I work with a lot of Marines. For some reason, my agency we have a great deal of them, and they all share a lot of common traits. It's really more than any other service, I think, that I've experienced as an outsider who hasn't, served in the military. But I always enjoy their ethos because it is so apparent. Like you can pick them out sometimes, like the cops that used to be Marines. Anyway, but you end up in the Marines. You do 2 tours, and you just touched on it there that you said you went to the same doctor that helped you with PTSD after you came back. So was the PTSD something you got diagnosed with before you even started policing? Because this right here, I think could really help reduce some stigma for people. And like you
Yeah.
just said about the other stuff, if this helps one person, walk us through how that diagnosis came about, if you don't mind, and like when did that happen?
A year after I got home, my relationship with my family was falling apart. And you mentioned the thing about we need to find something to blame so we can be angry about that and blame that kind of thing. I was blaming them. I was like, I'm fine. It's y'all. But but my dad pulled me aside and said, I'm not going to lose my family, and I'm losing my family. That hit my heart. And then a friend of his knew someone, and he suggested it. He said, "This is a former Air Force veteran. Go see him." And we did, and it helped. But that's what kind of started it, where the relationships were getting bad. So there was pain. I believe that people will change when there's pain, and unfortunately, sometimes when there is pain, there's no going back. Like when someone decides to take their own life, I mean, and they do it. Obviously, there's no going back. Pain is what changes us. And what I try to do now with law enforcement is make them aware of things so they don't have to go through the same pain that I did or many others have gone through before.
Hmm. That's it's really amazing. And so I think a big fear, particularly from officers that I hear from on the East Coast and the South, is that a PTSD diagnosis is a career killer. Like you're done, and this misnomer that's still out there that you get your badge and gun pulled, or you get the wooden gun and death duty kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
right.
to be honest, that still happens at some agencies. That still is an archaic
Yeah.
idea. But here you are talking about this. Were you even a cop at this point?
No, I was finishing up my last year at college at a university, but I was well on my way to applying to be at the,
Mm-hmm.
and I still got PTSD counseling and other counseling, including the addiction, like through my career there at the city. They never knew about it. I mean, I never went through the
Mm-hmm.
employee assistance program, so they never knew about it. So all the officers that think, well, it's going to be a career ender for me, there are certain things where you really have to get them addressed. And if that means being ordered to stay away from the job for a little bit, I mean, I'm no doctor, but yeah, there are things that meet that condition where the job needs to know. But I mean, for the most part, just dealing with generalized anxiety disorder or an addiction that was not like having me hurt anyone or put anyone else in harm's way,
Right.
yeah, I mean, they never knew.
Right.
So I know
I
it's a
think
bad
that's just
stigma.
it's such a simple lesson though, right? Like you go to your own doctors and absent, like you said, those really severe instances where you're a danger to yourself or others, like really a danger, just like you touched on general anxiety disorder, like that is not something that's going to trigger like a call from your psychiatrist or psychologist or your therapist or whoever to your agency to tell them to take your stuff, right?
Right, absolutely not.
Like there is a very narrow amount of things that they can divulge, and other than that, it's off the books.
Yep.
And I mean, I certainly wouldn't recommend for the people whose agencies have an EAP where your psychologist is also the guy who does your hiring and firing evals, like probably not the guy to go to. but most of that stuff is very private, and
Yep.
they
It
respect
is.
it. And if they divulge stuff that there's consequences to that. So I appreciate you sharing that, because anytime we can reduce this idea that simply going to counseling is a career, that's completely not true.
Oh no,
Uh,
it's not. It's definitely not. I encourage officers. We see things that our brains are not innately wired to see. When you wake up in the morning, you thinking to yourself, what can I eat? Who do I enjoy being around? What's fun during the day? The brain seeks pleasure and comfort. It doesn't seek what
mhm,
we as police officers see: the trauma, the stress, the night shifts where you don't sleep well, and that leads to other health benefits. We don't. This is not innate stuff. This is not what we're wired for initially. So yes, I encourage every officer. You have seen things that the average human is not meant to see. You have, or any human's meant to see. You have done
mhm,
stuff and you go through stuff that we're just not wired to go through. You can't do it on your own. It's not help, because I remember when the psychologist told me, I can only do so much for you, Scott. You have to be the one to decide to move forward. So when I say go get help, I'm not saying you can't do it on your own. You just need a little bit of guidance. It's like going to your supervisor and saying, "Hey, I need help with this report. I'm a little confused."
mhm,
It's the same thing with getting
mhm.
professional assistance through a medical provider.
After the riots and unrest of the summer of 2020, I began to get increasingly concerned about the fact that so much of my life is out there accessible to the public. I've been trying to figure out where that line should be drawn between what is shared on this podcast, on social media, or in interviews I give, and what should remain private for the security and safety of my family. Even though I'm a public person, that doesn't mean I want my personal information out there for the bad guys to find. I've arrested enough of them in my career that it makes me nervous to think my family could be exposed to those dangers. Not long ago, a suspect showed up at the front door of my partner's house 45 miles away from the station. I've had enough worry, but also I felt completely outmatched by the internet. I mean, it's the internet. Trying to take my name off of Google seemed insurmountable, and I learned that honestly, it is. But there's a lot we can do to protect ourselves, and that's removing our names from people's search sites and breaking the links between our home address and our names. I learned all this from my friends at officerprivacy.com, who are here to help me clean up the internet and the paper trail that is my life. A quick Google search shows a shocking amount of information about where I live, where I used to live, my family members, their names, their addresses, and even phone numbers. We need help protecting ourselves from the bad guys. You have partners on your beat, so get a partner on the internet. Check out officerprivacy.com for more information and learn how you can get started cleaning up the internet. And your path led to neuro-linguistic programming, which I only have a vague understanding of, but it seems intriguing. Can you give us a description and idea of what it is and then what it did for you?
It was very powerful. I had been going to clinical psychology just where it was kind of talk it out. But I
Mhm.
had a 2-hour appointment with the NLP doctor, and he was able to help me program my brain where I was thinking about the traumatic incidents from a third person point of view. So I wasn't reliving the trauma. And there's been other things through policing that affected me. Like when I saw someone, my first successful suicide, that really affected me. And I'm not afraid to admit that. It bothered the heck out of me. I had to go back because I couldn't get that thought out of my head. And he helped me to think about it third person, because if you think about it first person, the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between it really happening or if it's just the thought. You will have the same physical reaction of stress, tense muscles, anxiety. You can't think of something sad and be happy, bottom line. So he
Mhm.
really helped me to think about it third person, and I was able to cope with it a lot better that way. So that's what the NLP did.
So is it a process of like either questions or some sort of rhythm that the therapist or doctor puts you through, or is it that you talk it out? I'm trying to equate it to either like cognitive therapy or EMDR,
Right, right.
and trying to figure out where it is. How does that work differently?
He asked, "What do you see?" And I talked
Mhm.
about the incident. Hang on, my kid's crying. Let me go get him and I'll be right back.
It's fine.
All right, I'm back.
All good.
All right, I know what I
You
know
give
where I
it like
left off. So I'll just start from that.
go then
That's
go right
cool.
ahead. Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
And the second thing he said was, "Where do you see it?" And I had to literally picture where I saw it in my mind. Now this is where it goes beyond my ability, because he would go, "Oh, okay," because I said like I see it front and center, like right in front of me. He would go, "Oh, that's interesting." I don't know what he meant by that, but then he would say, "What do you feel when you see this attack?" It was a close fire mortar attack that almost killed me. And I would tell him what I felt, and then he would say, "Well, what else do you feel?" And then I would tell him how I felt with that emotion. And then he said, "Well, what else do you feel?" Basically, I would give every emotion, and then he said, and then he would get me to think about something good, and then he would say, "What emotions do you feel with that? Where do you see that?" And basically, I would take the image of the attack and move it over to the good part, to the good thought.
Hmm.
And I'm Catholic, so he knew that. So basically, you take someone's emotions to the highest thought they have, and my thought was God. And then he said, "Well, put that image of that attack and give it to God." Now, if someone doesn't believe in God, they have some kind of superior belief or their highest belief. And he said, "You can take that emotion and match it with that highest belief of good, and you can." And I would just picture the image going to the Lord, and that relieved its power over me, over the first person reliving of it. It was a very interesting process. And it was
Yeah.
amazing how I'd been going to counseling for 6 months or so, just talking it out with a school psychologist at the university where I was attending. And then but I was still having flashbacks, still having nightmares, all this kind of stuff. And with NLP, 2-hour session, I am so much better. It was amazing. And he's also done it throughout the police career as well.
You did you get in the habit of going for kind of the routine maintenance on stuff like that, or would you
Not
go when there
not
was
so
a
much
critical
routine
incident you just couldn't
maintenance.
shake?
Right, right. Exactly. Things I couldn't shake. Like the first suicide I saw, it bothered the heck out of me. I hated the guy did that, and it really affected me. And there was a part of me that was like, wait a minute, I'm a police officer. I'm tough. I'm supposed to be able to handle this. No, I couldn't. My heart was broken. And then there was another time where a guy was aggressive towards me and two other officers, and he was a dangerous MMA fighter. And I had trained in other stuff, but it was still like just nerve wracking. And that one, for some reason, it just made me so angry that he was almost about to stand in the way between me going home. It made me very angry, and those angry feelings did not go anywhere. So that stuff like that, where it just bothered me too much to handle it on my own, I would go see him.
The incident where you're yelling at the person on the car stop, when we talked about it right at the beginning, I think a lot of officers have been there. I remember, just to share a story, something so similar, where like slammed my patrol car door. Like I was already in the red before I ever went up to the guy, right? And even acknowledging to myself in that moment, like, ooh, that was a hard slam at the door. But then not being able to regulate as I'm talking to this guy, this poor schlub who just was on his way to work. I'm sure it was a good person, and just, I don't even know what they did. I don't remember what it was, but it was something stupid because it wasn't even an arrest. It was some, ran a light or something. Right. I don't know. And how my overreaction to that simple, stupid thing had to be so verbose or so like dramatic just to catch my attention, Yeah. And it was probably the first time for me too, where I was like, huh, like that's not normal.
Like, I'm changing.
Like, I work for a sheriff's office. Like, a hint for people about sheriff's office, at least in California, like, we don't care about traffic unless they're on a motorcycle. We don't care about traffic. Like we're not running tickets. We're not getting quotas. Like none of that. Like, so it wasn't like a passionate personal offense that happened. Like, poor dude got the wrong cop that day. And I remember sitting in my car after that and thinking, okay, that can't do that again. But to me, it was like, again, it was outside. Well, he did that and it was stupid and it's his fault. But if I keep doing that, someone's going to complain and I'm going to get an IAB for something like that. It was never, not never. It was a long time before I was like, oh, this is about me, not about them.
Correct.
What are the strategies that you have used through your career that have helped you be successful? We've talked about some of the struggles, but is there a common thread of things you've done that's helped you maintain as best you can, or things that you've implemented and adapted since you started? What are the things that you use to be successful and to, just maintain?
Right. First one for me is my faith. The second thing is exercising. I made a promise to myself in the very beginning. I cannot get out of shape. I mean, it could mean life or death if I'm in a fight. And any officer who's in denial of that, well, we all know, I mean, Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman says it best, denial is not a state of survivability. So I knew I needed to stay in shape because I didn't want to be that officer that got winded. And third is having friends outside of the job. I couldn't let all my friends be police officers. I knew that would just mean, guess what? All we talk about is law enforcement. And even it's so funny when I meet up with other cops and we say stuff like, well, we're not going to talk about the job. And sure enough, we go right into it.
That lasts about 5 minutes, if.
and then having something to work on. Because you might think, okay, well, the job is what you work on. No, we need to work on ourselves. And I took a great joy in practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for 7 years. And then after my third knee surgery, the doctor said, well, you're in your 20s and you've had your third knee surgery. Are you ready for a knee replacement? You might want to reconsider BJJ. I said, yeah, I think I'll get out of it. So then I got into Krav Maga, and it was easier on my knees because it was more stand-up stuff. But it went beyond the practices. It went to one, working out, two, helping me to focus and learn a skill, but three, the camaraderie I got. And I still have friends to this day who I trained with for years. And it doesn't matter how long I go without talking to them. If I call them right now, we could pick up where we left off. So having something outside of the job really, really helps. I know a ton of officers that work on carpentry, and some work on. I have one that well, he's out now. He's actually doing it full time. Just worked on leather making wallets,
Mm-hmm.
and I just don't want any police officer to get to a point where they're living and breathing in the job, and that's all they know.
It's so dangerous, and we always think it's not going to happen to us. We
Yeah,
start with friends outside, but then you're working the holidays and you're working weekends and you're sleeping during the day, and slowly those invites to those outside social events start to fade. Sometimes we
yep,
let them fade. If we don't fight for those friendships, they're gonna go away, right?
they will.
That they're gonna disappear. I think it's really interesting, this idea that you have to have something to put some, to what I hear is creative energy into. BJJ is very creative. It's a very creative sport, right? I mean,
Yeah, oh
like
yeah.
it's a really it's a combination of mental and physical strength and creativity. Leather making is creativity. The podcast that I'm doing right here, creativity. Your speaking
There
and
you
writing
go.
is all creativity. I think we sometimes as cops, as the alpha males or type A's or whatever, we hide our creativity because we have grown up in a society where creativity is equated to sensitivity,
Yep.
and that we can't be sensitive because we got to be in control, so we can't be creative. And I let that go for a long time. I don't think it was consciously about intentionally doing that, but for years I didn't do anything creative, and it burned that hole, and the minute I started doing creative things again, could see some serious improvements in just outlook, attitude, you know, purpose, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
How has creativity grown as you've grown, as you've gotten older?
Creativity has grown to the point now where I've written books. I'm on police podcasts. I'm speaking at conferences, all because of mistakes I made and the pain I went through. I just figured, why not take those struggles and help other officers, either prevent them from going through it, or if they are going through it, help inspire them to learn how to get out of it. All that because I went through enough crap where I was like, I have to work on me. And the more I worked on me, the more I realized, wow, life is more than just clocking in, surviving, coming home, watching TV, and waiting for that 20 or 30-year retirement where you can just be magically happy all of a sudden. No, I mean, we need to work on ourselves. And yeah, my creativity's grown a lot. And I have much more to learn. Don't get me wrong. We're never perfect and we're never going to be, but we can definitely strive to be as excellent as we can be.
So you did this, what, 7 years with your first department, your kind of dream department, and then you left because of the negative influence of these negative officers, right? And I think every agency's got somebody or a group that's that way. That's just
Right. Well, I left after
the organizational.
I left after 1 year
Right.
there, and then worked at the other one for 8 months, and then went back to the original apartment for 11 years after that.
Oh, okay. So
Yep.
that's a quick bounce, 1 year,
Yeah,
and
it
taking
was.
off, but it's that influential year too. There's so much of a cop's attitude about the job and about the department and about the public is in your field training and in that first year, where you were just a sponge to everything around you.
Yep.
And I always tell young cops, like, be careful of who you listen to, because they're going to be right either way, if you let them.
Very true.
So you leave, you realize you made a mistake, and you come back. Then you stay for, what is it, 11 years after that.
Yeah, 10 or 11. I can't do the math in my head, but several years.
But then you come to a point that I think a lot of cops, especially now, are at, where you see, it sounds like you see two paths start to emerge. One is that you talked about, staying in a career 20, 30 years, and it sounds like you see what's ahead of you there, or this other path. And
Mhm.
I'm curious if you can talk about that inflection point for you? What was it that you realized there might be something different for you there? And what kind of courage did it take you to step out and try something different?
Once again, mistakes and pain. In 2016, when I was working as a canine officer, I was on my third year with my dog. We were finally hitting our stride. We were really getting good. And my wife dropped that line on me. It's either me or the job. I was like, oh my gosh, I have let it go this much. And people say stuff like, well, she knew what she was getting into. She did. That's why she still married me. But at the same time, I didn't know how I had become until that line was dropped on me. I got reassigned as a school resource officer. I had to resign from canine or else I was going to lose my marriage. And I dang sure wasn't going to lose my marriage over a job. And anyway, so I got reassigned to school resource officers. I was working that Monday through Friday schedule. I hated it. Absolutely hated it. And then it became, once our second son was born, it was really becoming just very stressful on my family. All the schedule changes and the random events. And I love policing, but it was just, I hear so many cops say family first, family first, family first. But there was one officer, and he's still there now. He's about to retire. He told me, he said, I missed my son growing up. And that really resonated with me. I did not want to miss my kids growing up. So like I said, I got out of it full time, but also to pursue a career in speaking and being an advocate for police and their wellness and safety. But that really hit home where it had to have been family first. Now, I'm not saying that this should apply to every officer. If it works out for you, great, stick with it and be also present to your family. But the job didn't allow me to be present to my family, and I had to make a decision. And the good thing is the job ain't going anywhere. When my kids are older, policing will be there. I can get back into it full time.
I think that's a story that a lot of listeners are going to understand, that conversation with the spouse. It's either, giving the ultimatum. I think a lot of people have had that or something close to that. My sense is the initial reaction to that is, and that's probably why we end up with divorces like we do, right? But like, well, that's like, you just don't understand. Or again, we put it on the other person rather than accepting that the job, if we've allowed it to, and well, I say we allowed it to affect us, but really there's a lot about the job we can't control that just ends up affecting us and then affecting our families. Like you just touched on, like the random events, the forced overtime, the schedule shifts, and changes. Like those are all things that affect us. Yes. But it just throws the home life into chaos as well. And it's understandable, especially with hindsight, that our spouses, our wives or our husbands, don't want to live in that chaos, like they got dragged into it along with us. So I mean, I applaud the self-awareness to realize and prioritize, appropriately. Like you said, the job's going to be there. It's not like I guarantee you day you left, if you were an SRO and you left, last day was Friday, someone had that spot on Monday, right? Like, it's like,
no, your department will go on without you. I don't care how much of a big deal you think you are. Your department will go on without you. And also, I mean, I had a friend who I worked with for 4 years on the same patrol team. He got out of policing for 16 years after doing it for several years in the first part of his law enforcement career. He got out of it for 16 years. And then he was able to get back in when it was right. And then he was able to retire. So, yeah, I mean, if you have to walk away from it, walk away from it, as long as it's for the right reasons. I firmly believe in that.
And then this calling, though, towards speaking and writing, because you've written 3 books on policing. And, of course, we'll include those in the show notes and talk about this here in a bit. But, again, it takes some courage to step out, right? To say, I am going to go talk about law enforcement, health, wellness, leadership, all the topics you talk about, and putting yourself out there, right? And having that, because I know exactly what this is like, that sense of, who am I to be the one to go out and talk to people? Who am I to be the expert on this? Who am I to like go talk to this conference, right? So there is some internal courage in you too that you had to have overcome some initial reluctance to put your name out there, put your voice out there, tell your story. How did you overcome that?
I started listening to people online. When I would go to the gym, I used to listen to music a lot, but I started listening to Eric Thomas, Les
Mm.
Brown, Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins, Coach Payne. I'm saying these as slow as I can, so maybe people can make a note of them. But I started listening to them, and it was just this mentality of seeing something you want to be before you become that person. And there's always been this itch to speak, but obviously if I just thought about it, it wasn't going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about overcoming fear, and they just say one step at a time. It's not like you go from full-time police officer to full-time speaker. There's a process, but they talked about this stuff. And it just, over time, it really shaped my mentality to take what I had learned, the pain I had been through, and to start speaking about it. But also I learned in the Marines and in life in general, we don't become better or stronger because of easy times. Like when my life's easy, I'm glad it's easy, don't get me wrong, but I'm not really learning anything from it. But when I've
Mm-hmm.
made it through stressful deployments in Iraq or survived an ordeal in policing where thank God I was able to stay alive, it really puts things in perspective. Now, don't get me wrong, those experiences can break someone, but fortunately I've had them make me. And I have a lot to learn, but that's where the change started. It really did. Plus I knew for my family's sake, the way our family condition is, I was probably not going to be able to climb the ladder and work my way up in the ranks because it wouldn't have worked out for my family, and they come first. I still wanted to be of good service to police. Therefore, when I help them, they can be good for the public that they serve. So in a way, I can still be a part of this massive effort to keep America safe and do well as police officers.
Serving those who serve, right? That's great.
Exactly. Yep.
You know that I I really like what you just said too, where you've been through these things. We've already talked about the struggles you've had, but that they made you, and you chose the idea that they made you rather than choosing the idea that they broke you.
Right.
And I think there is another inflection point in many of us, or in our careers, or in our experiences, where we have to decide: is this going to be something I learn from and I build off of, or something that
Yep.
I allow to bury me? And oftentimes we let it bury us for a little bit first before we have to start digging ourselves right. And I've said this before, but like, if you're struggling and you've allowed it to bury you, the first thing to do is to stop digging. Just
Absolutely.
start there. Just start there. What when you encounter new officers, when you're taught, or any officer, when you're out doing your presentations and speaking, and you're interacting with officers, what do you see them struggling with, now, and has it changed since your own experience?
Negative thinking. We are what we expose our minds to. And I sure as heck wish that in the rookie school, they would have told us that simple principle, simple yet profound. You are what you expose your mind to. If you're around negative officers, you will inevitably be negative. If
Hmm.
you are already in a negative environment when you respond to those calls, you're going to be negative and you're going to have negative emotions and reactions from it. I wish that was explained. And I still see it to this day. I mean, there are literally some officers that, and I'll watch how I say this. There are some that don't need to be in the job anymore because they're completely miserable. And
Hmm.
I'm like, why are you killing yourself? I mean, literally, just
Yeah.
well, it's the retirement package. Well, you can still work on your own retirement.
Hmm.
I just don't want anyone to. We only live once, and I just don't want anyone to work themselves into a rut. And as you said, Garrett, like you have to stop digging. I don't want anyone to keep digging. If something is not good for you, then you have to act to change your perspective, or get away from it entirely. But also, and I think this really needs to start being trained in all the rookie schools, police academies, whatever you want to call it, whatever they call where you are. It has to be taught in every single one of them how the mind and how our bodies respond to trauma. Like I said, we're not innately wired to see people dying by a gunshot. We're not innately wired to see children who have been victims of horrible crimes. That is not what our brain desires. And if you see something that your brain does not desire, it is going to play that image. It's going to take a picture of that image, and then it's going to basically sear a memory into it. And with that memory comes an emotion, and our emotions cause our actions. This is not taught to new police officers, and it has to be. It absolutely has to be. And when it is, and when the culture starts to shift, I believe that our suicide rate will go down. I believe the negativity will go down. But we can't just be in bulletproof vests with a lot of duty gear on, thinking that we are robots out there unaffected by what we see. I unfortunately thought that. I thought, you know what? I exercise, I go to church, I have a good family, and I have good friends. I'm good. I don't need to work on myself at all anymore. I mean, and then, wife saying, you have to decide between me or the job, or me getting acid reflux because of stress. Man, I could go on and on if you can't tell. But I think those two things are very important. Negativity, it has to be reduced. And then also just us being informed that we are humans. We're not tough innately. We go through tough things and we have to make tough decisions, but we are affected by what we see. And I think that really needs, like I said, and I'll reiterate it really needs to be taught in the academy. In fact, I just released a book today, Truths Beyond the Police Academy, where I write about this stuff. So that book is now out.
Yeah, it's on Amazon as of today. It's out there
absolutely.
along with your other books. And you have 3 now, in addition to your videos and the speaking. And you're producing a lot of content. Your other books are 101 Health Tips for Police Officers and Mental Health Fight of the Heroes in Blue. The other thing I wonder, I touched on this at the beginning. We're tribal creatures, right? We're meaning-seeking creatures as humans. And one of the most powerful parts of being in any first responder profession is the group, the tribe. And that is our in-group, right? And we hold on to that sometimes with white knuckles because being part of that group is so important to us.
Absolutely, yeah.
And at the detriment to other things, right? This fear that if we leave this group, we will be adrift and outcast from the tribe and sent out onto the Serengeti by ourselves, right?
And it messes with our identity too.
Completely. And so I'm curious for you if that was ever a struggle, or that sense of identity, or leaving the tribe, and what you've found to be the truth on the other side of that.
Oh, yes. And I mentioned it in my books where I let the job become my identity. People say, what do you do? Oh, I am a canine officer. I am this. I didn't say I work as a police officer. You ask any other person, for the most part, outside of first responder or military, hey, what do you do? Oh, I work at Lowe's, or I work at this place. You see the difference in the language?
Mm-hmm.
It did mess with me. It became me. And then when I had to get rid of it, oh my gosh, I sank. I became depressed. I was like, oh my gosh, I let it become me. But also, it was hard to walk away. Back in August of 2020, when I left full-time at the city where I'd been for over a decade, yes, it was very tough to walk away. But you also realize who your real friends are. And to no surprise, I don't hear from a lot of the people I used to work with, but I'm not angry about that. I have my friendships that I still cherish and hang out with those people. And that's fine. And what's great about it is there are so many other people in this world who I've been able to network with, and other cops, literally from East Coast to West Coast, have been able to network with, which has been very fulfilling to help them and to network with them. Heck, talking to you right now, Garrett, it's been a remarkable experience. But yeah, the identity thing definitely hit me like it does so many others.
It's such a hang up, there's people who need to leave for their own health and wellness, just can't, they're holding on to it. And it's just, you want to come up and like grab them and give them a hug and be like, it's going to be okay. Or like, I have several friends who've left recently through medical retirements, and Some of them didn't want to leave. Some of them, it was a traumatic event that really gave them a hard left turn in their life, and they had to face an injury that they weren't expecting. Others, something chronic that just wouldn't go away, and they knew this was coming. They could see the light at the end of the tunnel. Across the board, and also some friends who've just left for entrepreneurial endeavors, right?
Mhm.
Across the board, they all feel okay with it. They're all good with it. But it took some of them a while.
Yeah.
But they've all accepted it and moved on and find joy in the things that they forgot they could do. Find joy in the fact that they don't have to work a 12-hour shift at night.
Right.
So the last thing I want to touch, the last question I have for you. I actually have a million more questions. But the last one I want to hit on, because I think this will be valuable for people, is what do you continue to do today, or what's your routine? Do you have a routine on a daily basis, or what are the things that you use on a regular basis to stay in communication with yourself, or in connection with yourself, and either how you're feeling, or how you're thinking, or how you are, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually?
I don't wake up right before the noise has to start. I don't wake up right before the day has to absolutely start. I start my day. The day doesn't start me, if that makes sense. Now, even if, like where I work now, part-time at a police department, I still have to work night shifts. So this applies if I, have sleep and I wake up in the afternoon. I make sure I give myself enough time to get my Bible readings in. I write down things that I'm grateful for. I exercise. I don't check the news, and I don't check my phone social media wise within the first 30 minutes to an hour of waking up. I just don't do it. Once I prime my mind and work out, I'm just that much more ready. Well, in fact, more ready to deal with the inevitable stressors or whatever that can come about during the day. I'm that much better. And when I worked patrol for the first 9 years of my career, most of the career, especially day shift, I would roll out of bed, get the uniform on, eat some breakfast, and then go to work. Gosh, that was a huge mistake. Had I just woken up earlier, and if you're saying, well, I don't like waking up early, okay, go to bed earlier. Just make time to do something that is good for your mind, which is definitely not social media and the news. That stuff is destroying us mentally. And I know everyone knows that, but it's just a matter of acting on it. So that's what I do. I just make sure I give myself enough time when I wake up, whether it be in the morning for day shift or in the afternoon when I have to work nights. Just make that time to do something very, very productive and feed your mind and body with great things.
I love that idea. I love the quote, "I start the day doesn't start me." That's fantastic. I find
Oh,
I'm always at my most successful and calmest when, I'm up early. I'm doing my gratitude and journaling or meditation, and then straight into working out. And if those things can be accomplished before I ever really pick up the phone or have to start packing the kids' lunches for school, like, that day is always, always, always going to be more successful than the other kinds of days. So
absolutely.
great, great advice, Scott. Where can people find out more about you, find your books, find you on socials, or where you're speaking next? Give us everything.
All right. Well, you can go to Amazon. You can type in Scott Medlin, and my name will come up with my 3 books. Truths Beyond the Police Academy was just released today, July 1st. And then,
Congratulations.
thank you. And then my YouTube channel is called the 10 Code Mindset. It's got several videos on there with interviews of other officers and a psychologist, other people. And then also it's just me talking about my experience and what you can do to be aware of signs and symptoms, because we're always aware of safety things like how to be on traffic stops or how to be on domestics. Well, I am teaching officers how to be aware of themselves so they can see the signs and symptoms so they can address it before it gets out of hand. That's what that channel is all about. So the 10 Code Mindset. And then you can go to my website, thescottmedlin.com, which used to be leomotivation.com. So if you type in the old domain name, it's fine. It'll come up, thescottmedlin.com. Scottmedlin.com was already taken. So thescottmedlin.com, and you can actually book me for speaking or training. Be more than happy. I'm really trying to make a difference in the law enforcement community to help us really feel fulfilled and excel on the job.
I love it. We'll put all those links in the show notes so that people can find them there if they're traveling and they, haven't written it down. But the show notes are going to be right in the episode description on any of the players that you have. You can also get those at thesquadroom.net with Scott's episode. So, Scott, thanks for your time today. I love this conversation. I really do have. I could go on and on with some questions. There's so much in your story that I connect with, and so some great advice to people that you've shared about tapping into that self-awareness quickly and being courageous enough to seek help even before it gets to the point where it's blowing up in your face. Being mindful of what you're inputting into your ears and your eyes, and letting those negative thoughts become your negative beliefs, and surrounding yourself with quality people and quality inputs and the stuff you listen to. All great advice for any cop, whether they're in the police academy or they're looking to retire or they're 10 years out from the job and just need to maintain some self-awareness and resilience. Those are all great tips and strategies. So thanks for being with us today.
I really appreciate it, Garrett. And if I may add one last thing, all
Sure.
this stuff Garrett and I have talked about, it's going to take work on your part. Nobody can do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. But one of the best quotes I heard one time was that if you seek to be better 1% more each day, a year from that point when you promised you'd be better, you're going to be 365% better. So it's not an overnight thing, but just work on yourself constantly, day in and day out. Because if you don't, then the job is just going to work on you, and it's probably not going to be a good outcome. So it does take work, but you do have the time and you have the ability and you have the discipline as long as you work on it. So it's been a great, Garrett. I really appreciate this honor. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for listening to this interview with Scott Medlin. You can find out more about him at his website. The links are in the show notes for all of his socials and such. As always, I refer the conversation back to our 6 points of resilience, just like the 6 points on my sheriff's star. But our 6 points of resilience are our badges, literally the badges, right? Now, not just the one on your chest, but our beliefs, actions, discipline, goals, emotions, and service. And Scott's a great example of that. Having the beliefs that he does. He's got strong beliefs, but also a strong belief about what it means to him to be a husband and father. And being able to act upon those beliefs in a way that benefited the greater family than just himself. Having the discipline to recognize his struggles with porn and getting some help in that area so that it wouldn't cause long-term damage to his family. And guy's got big goals. To really go out there, and we share a lot of the same goals in terms of how we want to go out and inspire law enforcement to be the best that they can be, not just in the field, but as a person. Scott's someone who has had to work very hard on his emotions, and we connect on that too, and keeping them in check and making sure that emotions are expressed appropriately, because really that porn addiction is, as he says, that porn addiction is his emotions coming out in the wrong way. If you think of a water balloon and you put pressure on it, it's gonna pop out in a weird spot. That's a horrible analogy, but I think you get my point. If we don't have a process through which we process our emotions, then those things spring a leak in some of the wrong places. And this is the first time we've ever had someone who came on to talk about a porn addiction. And I didn't know that, actually, before we started talking. It was a surprise to me. We've had people come on who've talked about, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, other risky behavior, but I hadn't had anyone yet who was at least willing to share their struggle with porn addiction. And that's very, very common. And it's one of the most common ways that we inappropriately deal with trauma. It's a risky behavior that should be a red flag at times. And I'm not making a moral judgment on porn in general, but if we are using it as a way to relieve stress and induce some serotonin and some dopamine into our system because of it, that should be a red flag that we might need to do some work. And then service, of course, Scott's very much in service. 3 books, he speaks, he's still serving part-time for his agencies. He's a busy guy, and it's all in service of others. So I really appreciate Scott's time today. All right, before we wrap up, I want to offer you something that's very exciting, and I'm having such a great time with it. It's absolutely free. We have launched Tactical Tuesdays. Many of you already know about it. It's a free weekly email where we bring you a few tactics, tips, and strategies to help you succeed in the week ahead. Maybe about a book I want to share, some gear I found useful, a video that might be worth watching, maybe some TV show that I'm enjoying or a documentary, anything else I think you'd like. To sign up for the Tactical Tuesday email list, you can visit thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays, or just text your email address to 805-364-2331. That's 805-364-2331. If you didn't catch that, check out the show notes for this episode, and you can find it there. I promise, we won't sell or spam your email address. Before we wrap up, I have a challenge for you as well. If you got something out of this episode, if you're inspired by this conversation, I want you to take a photo of your podcast player on your phone as you're playing this episode. And I want you to share it with 3 friends, people you think need to hear what we talked about today. Send them this episode and recommend they listen to it. Also, please consider leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. Please also leave a comment with your review if you got a few extra seconds. It really helps me create the show that's ideal for our audience, but also it really helps us spread the word about the show. Also, join our Facebook group and follow me on Instagram at The Squad Room. Special thanks to our sponsor today, OfficerPrivacy.com. If cleaning up your name on the internet and making it harder for criminals to find you is important to you, and it should be, check out the special offer at OfficerPrivacy.com/The Squad Room, where you'll get a free USB data blocker and 1 month of free monitoring when you sign up through that link. It's OfficerPrivacy.com/The Squad Room. Also, there's other great companies you can learn about that support our show and support you. You can just go to thesquadroom.net/support for those. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.